Good afternoon and welcome to the CERIAS weekly seminar at Purdue University. It is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. Dr. Florian Kirschbaum is a professor in the David R. Cheriton School of Computer Science at the University of Waterloo. He holds a PhD in computer science from the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, and we're proud to say he's received his master's degree from Purdue University in 2001. His research focuses on security and privacy in the data science lifecycle. We're very excited to have him back at Purdue after all these years. Today, he is speaking about using differential privacy. Florian, welcome back to Purdue. Please take it away.
Well, thank you very much for that very nice introduction. I want to talk about two recent research results that I came up with, or we came up with as a group. So my group and I have been working on, and I want to introduce you to those. So many of you have probably seen this picture, is that data is the new oil, right? Was the title of it at The Economist. And we clearly see that data is creating huge economic value, right? So we have many sources of data. We use those data in order to, in machine learning applications, we train machine learning applications to provide better services. And with the rise of the Internet of Things, more and more data, even about the physical world, is going to be generated. However, if you ask people who are data scientists what they actually see as the major obstacles to exploiting that data, then one problem consistently comes up, and that is privacy. So 58% of the Fortune 500 companies see a conflict between data scientists and data security. 48% of people see data privacy or data security issues as the number 2 and 4 problems. Admittedly, the number 1 problem is there are not enough data scientists, but a clear second is security and privacy. So given this need for security and privacy, what can we do about it? There's a technique which is called differential privacy. And we see a lot of research on using differential privacy in machine learning, in data science applications. And the assumption is that if we design differentially private mechanisms, then the information is being protected. And today I want to talk a little bit about how to use differential privacy in the right way. So what does differential privacy actually achieve, and what does it not achieve? So for those of you who have not heard the term differential privacy first, so far, I want to give a little bit of an introduction. Differential privacy is the idea that given two data sets that differ in one record, and this is a personal identifiable record, so we see a person here in the middle who is present in database A but not present in database B. Then if I run a query, which differential privacy people call a mechanism, over those two databases, the output should not change much. In particularly, what differential privacy does, that it turns that query into a probabilistic query, into a randomized query that has an output distribution. And on that output distribution, if you see the equation on the bottom here, there is a bound how much the output distribution can change between the two databases. So if I query database A and take any subset of the output, the probability of producing an output in that subset should not be higher than e to the epsilon, which is the privacy parameter epsilon, then of the probability of doing that with the same query, same mechanism over the database B, where that person is not present. So it is inherently a limitation on the impact any individual record can have on the outcome of a query. The assumption that is then made is if the impact of any individual is limited, therefore the inferences that can be made in the reverse way are limited, and privacy is provided. And we're going to challenge that view a little bit today. So the first thing I want to talk about is why differential privacy does not protect against membership inference attacks as expected. Okay, so what's a membership inference attack? So if we have a target model, so a machine learning model, in this case a neural network model, that was trained on some data, and on the left side you see training data with a whole bunch of training pictures, and on the right side you see out of training set, right? You see data that was not used to train the data, and you see a whole bunch of pets that were not part of that training set. So given an individual sample that is that picture in the middle, a membership inference attack now tries to determine, did this picture belong to the training set or to the out of training set? And that is the determination that means I can determine from the model alone some private information about the people who were part of the training data set. So the model leaks information about the people who trained the model. So right from the start, I want to say that membership inference is probabilistic, right? The output of a membership inference is, okay, the sample that is shown in the middle of the previous picture is a member or a non-member. And we measure as a success of the membership inference rate, we measure the probability of this guess being a member or non-member being correct, right? So it's a probability. It is not always correct. And this is also necessarily so. So membership inference attacks cannot possibly be 100% correct. In order to see that, you have to understand that machine learning training is a subjective randomized function. The training data set is much larger than the size of the model that you train, even the size of the models if you consider hyperparameter tuning. So by the pigeonhole principle, there must exist two different data sets which result in the same model. And in the same notion, there exists a sample whose membership cannot be determined with 100% accuracy from the model. Okay, so a membership inference attack must be probabilistic. It must be a guess whether or not a sample is in the data set or not, in the training data set. So what can you do with differential privacy against membership inference attacks? And one notion that you can use is what's known as differentially private learning. And you might have heard about differentially private stochastic gradient descent, which is probably the most popular form for doing that in neural networks. And again, we have the potential of two training data sets, one with a record, one without a record. Then we have a training process, and now we have two models. And if the training process is differentially private, the distribution of the output of the training process between those two models should not differ by more than e to the epsilon, right? So depending on whether or not the record is in there, the probability of outputting one model should not increase by more than e to the epsilon. Now, it seems natural that differential privacy would prevent a membership inference attack, right? Because the impact of each member in differentially private training is bounded. So if that is bounded, a membership inference attack should only succeed with a bounded probability. And Yeom et al. Were the first to formalize this notion, and they gave a practical membership inference attack that worked very well for the time it was invented. And they gave a proof that differentially private learning bounds the success of any membership inference attack. They give a specific bound on how this turns out to be. So this is the formal game they came up with. And this is a this is kind of important to see. So what they do is you have a data distribution of all of the possible samples. You sample a training data set, and they assume independent, identical, distributed sampling. Then you either sample a member from the data set or a non-member from the distribution. And then depending on a bit B, you give either of the one to the adversary and the trained model, the target model, to the adversary. He also gets the distribution, but we ignored that for now. But based on the target model and this sample, which with 50% probability is a member, or with 50% probability is a non-member, the adversary is supposed to output its guess which of the two it is. And you can compute something which they call the membership advantage, which is basically the true positive rate minus the false positive rate, or twice the probability that the guess is correct minus 1. So it is somewhere bounded between 0 and 1. It's just scaled, because it's 50% probability you always guess right. It's scaled the upper part between 0 and 1. Now, there's follow-up work where they took certain public data sets, trained them with different accounting mechanisms for differential privacy. And you see here the epsilon differentially private bound is the bound that Yeom et al. Come up with. And they say, like, look, I mean, even if we try, we really cannot get close to this bound, right? So the gap between the successful membership inference attack and the membership inference attacks, the theoretical bound is very wide. So it was assumed that differential privacy not only provides a protection, it provides actually a stronger protection than the bound would suggest. Now, one thing to note here is, if you look at those experiments, the models, the fact that they actually can perform a membership inference attack is only due to the fact that they heavily, significantly overfit the models, right? So we sometimes have 100% training accuracy, but test accuracy in the range of 20%. As low as 20% in these experiments. So it's heavily overfitted models, and therefore the membership inference attacks work. Okay, so we thought that is interesting. However, we always read about differential privacy and the problems of differential privacy under correlated data, right? You have dependent differential privacy for correlated data, and all these works who try to understand how correlated data impacts differential privacy. Okay. So we took this experiment that Yeom and al. Did, and we just wondered, what if we replace the IID sampling with a non-IID sampling? What happens then? We changed nothing else in their experiment. We used the same attacker. We just changed IID sampling to non-IID. And here's the result. So this is a number. This is a specific membership inference attack. It's actually a slightly improved membership inference attack over Yeom's original proposal, but it is the same algorithm that Yeom et al. Suggested. And we can have here 4 data sets from 4 hospitals from different regions of the world. And those are 4 very similar data sets. We trained the same classifier for heart disease prediction on all 4 classifiers. And the non-IID is in blue and the IID is in orange. And the IID bound by Yeom et al. Is just depicted as this dashed line. Now that the IID data breaks the bound is actually a mistake because of the sampling, but that the non-IID data, we can clearly see that this absolutely breaks the bound. So what we did, we used one hospital, and this is the hospital you see on the top line, as the in-training data set, and used the other 3 as the out-of-training data set. So clearly, if you use real-world data sets, the probability of having a successful membership inference attack is much higher than the bound would allow. Okay, so a few cautionary notes right away. So we used an unmodified membership inference attack by Yeom et al. So this attack has no background information on the distribution of members and non-members. We did not make any kind of assumption that the attack knows any kind of background information. It's exact same algorithm that Yeom et al. Used where they actually had proven the bound. It's just that the threshold that they use is slightly optimized. We used real-world data sets. This is data sets that you can find on the internet. And we used standard machine learning training. Our models do not overfit. There is no overfitting in those models. It's not due to overfitting. The training and the test accuracy on those data sets is very close. So, however, clearly the attack exceeds the bound for non-IID data. So the only possible conclusion is that differential privacy does not protect as expected by Yeom et al. Against membership inference attacks in a real-world classifier. It's the only possible conclusion. Okay, so we now need to investigate of why do we have this behavior? So the first thing that we also know is that the bound could actually be tighter. So the proof, if we make an IID assumption, could be tighter. And there was already a tighter bound in another paper by Alexon et al. However, we gave an even tighter bound. And if you make black box assumption about the training process and don't go into specific training processes like like DPSGD or others, then this is the tightest bound that you can possibly prove. And then we also asked ourselves, okay, now we have this tighter bound. What can we possibly do? How bad is the situation if we violate this assumption of IID data? So we try to create a worst case. So in the worst case, what we did is we took the original data, and this is the adult data set. So everybody who works in data science has probably heard about the adult data set. And we took this data set and we applied a clustering algorithm. We divided it into 2 clusters and then applied a geometric split between those 2 clusters. And now we applied 3 different kind of attacks. The average threshold attack is the exact attack as Yeom's et al. The optimal threshold attack is Yeom's attack with an improved threshold. And the shadow model attack is Shokre's et al. Attack, which was actually the first membership inference attack that there was. And all 3 of them break the bound clearly and significantly. I mean, they go all the way up to almost 90% accuracy, even before the model, or 80% accuracy when the bound would say it has to be less than 10%. So it can be really, really bad case. Okay, this is a case that we artificially instructed. This is no real world data, but it is still a real world data set. It is the adult data set, but we split that artificially in members and non-members. And on the right side, you can also see that now the accuracy between members and non-members, and often people use the test data set as non-members, which we didn't do, but the accuracy difference between members and non-members is huge. Then we ask ourselves, okay, so is this actually a privacy attack, right? Is this something that we should worry about? So we split the information based on a sensitive attribute, in this case, gender. So now the adult data set is a little bit of a dated data set, so there are only 2 genders. And we took a percentage of men and a percentage of women. And this is this P percentage that you see in the second picture here. And we varied the percentage and then wanted to see, are we going to break the bound again? Now, the break in this case is not as pronounced as it was in the case of the artificial split, but still it clearly breaks the bound. So even in this case, we can infer sensitive information when when the proof of differential privacy would say it would protect it. Okay, now we have to ask ourselves, can we somehow capture this, right? We have shown that when removing the non-IID assumption, in Guillaume's experiment, the bound does not move. The non-IID assumption cannot be possibly be enforced in practice. You will never know whether or not your data set is actually IID or not. You try your best, but you cannot really make it happen. We all experience that in voting polls, right? We always have this margin of error. And that is due to the fact that sampling people is hard, right? And in this case, sampling people who will tell you the truth is hard. But we cannot ensure that our samples are non-IID. So bound that with the fact that existing membership attacks actually break the bound, we need to assume that non-IID sampling actually is taking place in membership inference. So we came up with a slightly modified model. So instead of sampling from one distribution, we sample from a mixture distribution. And particularly from one marginal, the training data set is sampled from one marginal of the mixture distribution. Then we again sample either a member from the training data set or a sample from the mixture distribution without the distribution or the margin of the members. And these are our 2 samples. This is the experiments that we actually did. The bit decided which of the 2 samples is going to be chosen and given to the adversary, and the adversary has to make his guess. So this would be a model that would capture the observations that we have made when running actual membership inference attacks. So now we can ask ourselves a couple of questions again. Is there a provable bound on the membership inference attack by deep RP learning? And the answer is yes, there is. But it requires noise proportional to the size of the data set. The bound, at least the bound that one can trivially come up with. So it's n times epsilon, and that is very inconsequential, right? So even if you would apply extreme noise, I mean extreme noise, that you basically have very low accuracy and have a very large training data set, your epsilon would be huge, right? There could clearly be a tighter bound. We cannot rule it out, but we are not, the proof is non-obvious. Could the adversary use the distribution information in the attack? So if we look at this picture again, the adversary is given the distribution information, and the answer is yes. Yes, he could. But in practice, this distribution is maybe a little bit too convoluted to be useful, right? Marginals can overlap. There are almost infinite marginals in the real world. So this distribution in the real world is rather complex. So a practical attack might not capture that case. Of course, by taking a distribution that you tailor in the lab, you could always exploit the information. However, it's important to understand that this distribution information is not necessary for the attack to be successful. And we actually could have removed it. And we only didn't remove it because we tried to stay close to Yeom et al.'s original formulation. Okay, now let me talk about a different formulation of membership inference that is sometimes being promoted. In this case, there's a sample data point S and a training data set. And those two could actually be chosen by the adversary, both of them. Sometimes people do not do that to not make it as obvious why this model is questionable. But sometimes people even argue, oh, this is a much stronger model because the adversary can choose the samples. However, then the model is either a data set with the sample or without the sample is being prepared. The bit chooses one of those two samples, and then a target model is being trained. And that target model is given to the adversary for membership inference. Again, we can ask ourselves a few questions about this experiment. Does Yeom et al.'s original bound hold in this model? And the answer is yes. This enforces the bound. You can make the proof of the bound in this model. We still need to keep in mind that an actual membership inference attack breaks the bound. So we have to ask ourselves, why is that the case? So one question we can ask, is the data scientist free to choose its training set? And the answer is no. There's a dependence between the bit in the experiment, the bit that is chosen in the experiment, and the training of the model. So the adversary can only use start training after that bit is chosen. You could even say he has to wait for the adversary to give him the data set. And the adversary's choice is not to decide whether or not the sample was drawn from the member or non-member distribution, as it was in the previous version of the formulation, but whether the training set was performed with or without the sample. So it's a completely different semantic of the bit B. And therefore, in this bit, it's not surprising that the original bound holds, but in an actual membership inference experiment, it does not hold. Okay, so I want to conclude this part of the presentation. Differential privacy provides strong protection against in its attacker model, but does not against the practical membership inference attack. The difference emerges when the training data sets are non-IID sampled, which is the only case in practice. There is no IID sampled data in practice. And we need to define a formalization of membership inference attack that captures this behavior that we observed in the real world. Okay. So this was one part of the presentation I wanted to give. And I wanted to just highlight another aspect of how to use differential privacy. and that is about data collection. And it is about a combination of multi-party computation and differential privacy. And this is joint work. You see here the paper title. Also, the other work was joint work with my students. And this paper will here appear at CCS this year. So what is the problem? And this is a problem that happens a lot of times in the real world. We have a lot of devices, usually there's mobile phones. We do some sort of measurement. How often do you click on this map? What words do you type? All sorts of things. What emojis do you use? And we take those measurements and we collect them at some data collector. However, the data collector is only interested in an analysis and a statistic over that data and not in the individual data. So what we actually want is we want to go from the samples right away to the analysis. Okay, how is this usually done? Usually this is done in practice right now with something which is called local differential privacy. So each client randomizes its value and sends them to the untrusted server, which, if there are sufficiently enough data points, can reconstruct the approximately correct statistics. So I don't need a trusted data server and this, however, need huge amounts of data because the accuracy is very low. In the central model, the clients would send plain text values, but the server would be trusted, which is our problem to start with. In this case, we could get high accuracy even for low number of data samples, but we have the trusted server. So what we do is we emulate the trusted server in a multi-party computation. So it's not necessarily clients, but some set of servers. They jointly compute the function that the trusted server would compute. So we don't have one trusted server, and we have high accuracy also for small data. However, the question always is this efficient? So here we have a computation where we want to collect key value statistics. Also a problem that very frequently is solved using local differential privacy, and there are many values for this. So here we have a number of clients, they have a keyword and they have an associated value. And the server wants to compute, for example, in most cases what we consider the mean or the sum or some statistic about the values per keyword. As I said, the existing solutions that have been proposed in the literature mostly use local differential privacy. And the challenge here is that differential privacy, if you also make the keyword and the value a little bit noisy, then you break their correlation and the statistics get messed up. However, there are ways of how you can try to solve this. Still, you're in the local differential privacy module, so you need noise proportional to the number of clients. You could also do this in multi-party computation. However, if you secret share the keyword, then the servers need to index into some sort of hash table, database table, or whatever, where the keywords are stored using the secret shares. And unless you have ORAN, which again is extremely slow with extremely large constants, you have to essentially for each keyword scan the entire database. If you're not using RAM-based multi-party computation, which however has even larger constants and for most practical purposes is even slower. You could also try to add dummies such that the keyword values are sort of the number of keywords is perturbed. However, you would need a large number of dummies because you cannot avoid sending the real keywords because that would otherwise destroy the statistics. Yeah. So you always have to send, the clients have to always send their real keywords, and you could add one-sided dummies, a shifted Laplace distribution, a clipped shifted stress distribution, and then you would have it, but you need a huge number of dummy elements. It would clog your network. So here's the idea, and it's a very simple idea, but it's an extremely neat, extremely powerful idea. And the idea is what we call selective MPC. So you have here two clients. One has a dog, has a cat, one has a dog keyword. And they create values, and they not send to all of the servers, but only to a subset of the servers. So in the first one sends to 1 and 2, and the second one is actually a dummy. He sends to 2 and 3. So we have now created false negatives for some of the servers, because the secret share for the remaining nodes is logically 0, which is the neutral element in a summation, and we can therefore ignore. Now, after that, after all of the keywords have been collected, we now have the keywords in plain, because we can use them in plain, and we have generated false positives and false negatives entries, so nobody knows what the real value, the real number of keywords is, but their values are secret shared between sufficiently many other servers. We can now aggregate them a regular computation, and we just need to scan the database once. And at the end of the scan, at the end of each keyword aggregation, the server is simply going to add differentially private noise, central noise, according to a central distribution, a Laplace noise distribution with which we call epsilon f, and that is our total summation. And the leakage of the previous case of collecting the keywords plus the noise, and this is our total privacy budget. So now we can see, we can compare this to other solutions. And our protocol has a communication of the number of samples, that is each sample sent by a user plus the sum of the dummies that we need, which are, however, relatively small, a rate factor based on each keyword. So they are proportional to the keywords. And our MPC complexity is only O of n. We only need to compute for each keyword once. And our error is independent of the number of users. So if we look at the local DP column, we see that they have very low communication because they basically send one message for all of their keywords, but they have a very high error, that is the square root of the number of users. And the naive MPC solution has a complexity of all the samples times all of the keywords. So if you would execute the naive solution, the running time would be days, hours, several hours, and you could not possibly compute this statistics for a reasonable data set size. However, if you look at our time, and we have different kinds of curves here, L is the number of servers, and we have to have multiple servers, of course. We see that in green, the malicious computation, which is only necessary in a few cases, where the semi-honest computation, we are faster than 2 seconds in this case, and I can show a set for the multiple keywords later on. And the more servers we have, the leakage from the plain text keywords approaches a value of 0.5, and there's an explanation on the paper of why this bound exists. But you see that we also relatively quickly approach this bound. And we send very few data elements on the order of a few megabytes, even for many records. So here again is our single node benchmark. The interesting one is if you compute 10,000 keys with 5 nodes in the semi-honest model, it's taking us 20 seconds. And in the malicious model, it's taking us 26.27 seconds. So you can really see and it's really a very efficient multi-party computation. All right, so I can now approximately wrap up my talk. This is the conclusion of this presentation still. So we have seen that MPC can provide almost the accuracy of the central model without the need for a trusted server. MPC can be efficient on the order of seconds in our case. And the selective MPC that we came up is a very useful tool in key value statistics. Now, with this, I would like to conclude my talk. I'll thank you for the attention. I already see that there are a few questions in the chat and in the questions and answers. And here is a little bit of a summary of my talk. And feel free to reach out to me via email even after this talk.
All right, great. Hey, thanks a lot. I really appreciate this presentation. So let's look at the questions here. So just one question real quick, could you share this PowerPoint presentation with us?
I will share it, yes, of course.
Okay, great. That's awesome, because we will post it on our website along with the video for this. The video will be available on our website at Purdue or CERIAS.purdue.edu and also on our YouTube page. The other question, I believe this was in regards to around slide 35 here. It says, why is E raised to the power of epsilon used and not just epsilon alone?
I'm not sure that I understand the question. What is epsilon used?
Why is the power of epsilon being used, I believe is what the question is.
Where is your power of epsilon? I don't see it.
Maybe it was before that because it came in at around that slide. Let me see if Benjamin, did you want to use your mic?
Okay, in the beginning of DP. Okay. All right. So we have a question on the definition of differential privacy here. And E, why is it E to the epsilon?
Yes, I believe that's the question.
Yeah. Okay, so that is that the reason for this is how the bound on the Laplace distribution works. So epsilon is the privacy parameter, right? So you can prove that this bound holds for the Laplace mechanism. And if you have a nice composition theorem now, because if you have one party present, then the probability changes by at most a factor of E to the epsilon. If you have a difference of two parties, it changes by E to the epsilon times E to the epsilon, or 2 times E to the epsilon, or E to the 2 epsilon. Or if you have 3 parties missing, it's E to the 3 epsilon. So you have what's called the group privacy notion in this definition that you can easily apply. So for each party, you approximately lose an epsilon type of an epsilon equivalent value of information. It's about the calculation. So this is a very different question. I didn't go into that question a lot. This is a very good question, Huang. Many theoretical results only hold for epsilon between 0 and 1. However, if you want to do a practical machine learning model, you're probably already somewhere at an epsilon of 3. Otherwise, your accuracy is going to be very, very, very low. And as we have seen in many cases, it can still provide a good level of privacy unless you're in your data set is good. Now, the cases of local differential privacy that I presented. So Apple actually collects emoji information using this local differential privacy, where I presented for key value stores, and a different type of statistic. They actually use local differential privacy here. And they initially had it at epsilon of 14. I think they lowered it afterwards, but epsilon of 14, the theoretical guarantee that you saw up there, e to the 14, is of course huge, right? So the theoretical guarantee is completely useless, completely inconsequential. However, in practice, even for local differential privacy, which is what they use here, an an epsilon of 14 still gives you a pretty good protection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes. So this is Mike Atala. Yes, Florian, it makes perfect sense. You answered it.
All right,
perfectly.
thank you, thank you.
You answered it perfectly. Perfect answer.
Thank you, Mike.
Excellent talk, by the way.
Thank you, I appreciate it, much appreciated. Any more questions that I should answer?
No, it looks like we don't have any more questions here. But yeah, thanks again, Florian. It was a great honor to have you back again, and really appreciate this talk. And hopefully we can see you on campus sometime in the near future too. That would be great.
Yes, of course, that would be fantastic. Thank you, thank you.
So attendees, thanks a lot for joining us. We'll have another seminar next week, 4:30 Eastern time. Thanks, Florian. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.